Depression isn't weakness, it's the soul's call to stop living a lie. Carl Jung. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. You wake up and immediately feel it. The weight. It's not sadness, it's not even pain. It's emptiness, like your soul unplugged from the rest of you. Like you're still alive technically, but something essential is no longer there. You go through the motions, shower, coffee, emails, fake smiles, but inside, it's just nothing. You wonder how you even got here, because technically, everything's fine, but it's not, and you know it. There was a time you felt alive. Maybe it was years ago, maybe you don't even remember when, but somewhere along the way, something broke. You didn't notice it right away. It started with tiredness. Then came the irritability, the loss of interest. You thought it would pass, but instead, it got heavier. Now, the thought of answering a message or stepping outside feels like too much. You're not lazy, you're not weak, you're just tired in a way sleep can't fix. Depression doesn't scream, it whispers. It tells you you're worthless, slowly, quietly, persuasively. It removes color from your life so gradually that one day you realize everything feels gray. Food has no taste, people have no meaning. Joy becomes a memory you no longer trust. And yet, no one sees it. You still function. You go to work. You laugh on cue. You even say, "I'm fine," without thinking. But the truth is, you're not. You've tried things, vitamins, podcasts, a few sessions with a therapist who seemed more tired than you, self-help books that told you to just think positive. You even tried gratitude journaling, but writing down, "I'm grateful for my coffee," while your chest burns with emptiness, felt like a cruel joke. You've heard all the right words, but nothing penetrates the fog. You started wondering if maybe you're just broken, defective, beyond repair. Because how could something hurt so much when nothing specific even happened? No trauma, no loss, no reason. Just this invisible hand around your throat every morning, every damn morning. And the worst part? You can't explain it. Not really, not in a way that others understand. "I'm just not okay." That's all you can say. And even that feels like too much. People offer advice. Go outside more. Exercise. Call a friend. And you nod, knowing they mean well. But inside, you feel like screaming. You want to say, "I can't. I literally can't." Not because you don't want to, but because it's like your nervous system is stuck in mud. Your thoughts are fog, your body numb, and your heart, it's quiet, too quiet. But there's one thought, one belief that refuses to die. Even at your lowest, it's still there, fragile but steady. There is always a way out, always. That thought becomes your anchor. It doesn't fix anything, but it stops you from falling deeper. And somehow, that's enough. Enough to keep breathing. Enough to stay curious. Enough to start asking real questions. Not how to be happy, but how to survive when happiness is gone. You begin to study the darkness, not from the outside, but from inside it. You start observing it like a scientist. What is this feeling? Where does it sit in the body? What triggers it? What makes it worse? What dulls it, even slightly? You notice patterns. Certain people drain you. Certain places make it worse. Certain hours of the day are harder. You begin to map your own suffering. Quietly, patiently, you realize that depression isn't just sadness, it's disconnection from others, from your body, from your emotions, from yourself. It's not about crying all the time. It's about not feeling anything at all. It's when life stops making sense. When everything that once gave you purpose feels irrelevant. When the future feels like a dead end. When your own reflection feels unfamiliar. And yet somewhere in all that, there's clarity. You realize you've been carrying pain that doesn't belong to you. Guilt that isn't yours. Shame that was planted in you before you could speak. You begin to see how much of your inner world was shaped by things outside your control. Parents who didn't know how to love, a culture that worships productivity over humanity, a life lived on autopilot. You don't have solutions yet, but you have honesty. And maybe for the first time, you're not trying to fix yourself. You're trying to understand. And that changes everything, because understanding brings compassion. And compassion quiets the inner war. Maybe healing isn't about becoming someone else. Maybe it's about finally coming home to who you've always been. You start looking for answers, not surface-level tips, not 10-step guides. You want the truth, raw, uncomfortable, real. You dig through articles, research papers, old interviews, podcasts, forums where people speak without filters. You start noticing something no one told you. Depression isn't just mental, it's physical. It lives in the nervous system. It shows up in your posture, your breath, your digestion, your voice. Your body becomes frozen. That's why motivation doesn't work, because depression isn't about laziness, it's about survival. When the body thinks it's not safe, it shuts everything down. You learn about the vagus nerve. You read about how chronic stress deregulates the autonomic system. You realize that what you thought was your fault is actually the way your biology responded to years of emotional overload. You're not weak, you're overloaded. Not broken, just disconnected. And suddenly, that simple sentence, "There is always a way out," starts feeling less like fantasy and more like a possibility. Because if your system can collapse, it can also rewire. Slowly, gently, deliberately, you find out how trauma works. Not just big events, but small moments of neglect, rejection, shame, repeated over time. You begin to understand emotional memory, the way your system remembers everything you tried to forget, and how depression isn't just a symptom, it's a message. It's your system asking you to stop running, to turn around, and finally face what's been buried. You don't need another distraction. You need to feel what you once suppressed. That's the only way through. You realize why most advice doesn't help. Because it doesn't address the root. Because it treats depression like a mindset, not a system-wide shutdown. And that's why it fails. You remember how guilty you felt for not trying hard enough. And now, for the first time, you feel something else. Rage. Rage at a culture that tells people to just get over it. Rage at all the fake smiles. Rage at yourself for believing it was your fault. But under that rage, grief. A deep, old grief for the years lost in silence. And that grief is holy. It's clean. It's not weakness, it's truth. You let yourself feel it. You cry, not out of despair, but out of recognition. You're finally honest with yourself. This is what it means to stop running. This is where the real work begins. You're no longer trying to become normal. You're trying to become whole. And listen, if these words feel like something you've never heard before but always needed, subscribe to the channel. Let the algorithm show this video to someone else who's been holding it together for too long. And join the Telegram. That's where we speak the language no one else around you does. The language of what's real. No filters, no fake light, just truth, pain, clarity, and movement. Because this isn't content. This is a space for those who are done pretending. A space where your darkness isn't judged, it's understood. So if you feel it, stay. If your body is saying, "Finally, someone gets it," then follow that signal. Not because this is a solution, but because this is a place to begin. Back to the process, you notice a shift. Not dramatic, not instant, but something starts opening. You feel moments of presence, seconds maybe, but they're real. And in those seconds, you're not numb. You're here. You start noticing your breath again, your heartbeat, the shape of your thoughts. You're not healed, but you're awake. That's more than most people ever get. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to get better, you start becoming real. You're not chasing the old version of yourself anymore. You're meeting the version that was buried under expectation, fear, and noise. That version is not perfect, but it's true. And that truth, that's your way out. So no, you're not lost. You're just in the part of the story no one talks about. The in-between. The breakdown before the rebuild. The darkness before the clarity. And it's brutal, yes, but it's sacred. Because this is where you meet yourself. You start seeing the pattern, not just in your own life, but everywhere. Most people aren't living, they're performing, playing roles, repeating scripts. You realize how early it starts. You were taught to be good, not real. Taught to fit in, not to feel. Every time you were shamed for being too loud, too quiet, too sensitive, you learn to split off a piece of yourself. That's how the mask forms. That's how you lose yourself. Not in one moment, but in 1,000 small compromises. And now, years later, your body carries the cost of all that pretending. You begin to trace your pain back to its roots. The people you tried to please, the expectations you tried to meet, the emotions you weren't allowed to express. You realize that depression isn't just yours, it's inherited. Generations of unprocessed pain passed down like family heirlooms. You see how your parents were also lost, also disconnected, also trapped. It doesn't excuse what they did, but it explains what they couldn't give. And in that, something inside you softens, not to forgive, but to finally stop expecting what they were never able to provide. You start looking at your life through this new lens. The job that drains you, the relationship that silences you, the friends who don't really see you. And for the first time, you stop blaming yourself for not thriving in a world that punishes sensitivity and rewards numbness. Of course you shut down. Of course you adapted. You were surviving. And now you're waking up. You learn about the shadow, the parts of you you've rejected or hidden, the anger you weren't allowed to feel, the need you were taught to be ashamed of, the power you've been afraid to claim. These parts don't go away. They wait. And depression is what happens when they've been waiting too long. You're not sick. You're full of unfelt emotions, unmet needs, unspoken truths. Your system is saturated. That's why it's shut down. And now, the only way forward is through. Not around, not above. Through the pain, the memories, the grief. Not all at once, but honestly, piece by piece. And as you start letting these parts speak, something shifts. You don't collapse. You expand. You don't fall apart. You unfold. And in that unfolding, you don't just survive. You start remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. You reach a point where the old strategies no longer work. You've read the books, watched the interviews, tried the supplements, gone to therapy, journaled your thoughts, practiced gratitude, but nothing sticks. Not because you're doing it wrong, but because something deeper is asking to be heard. It's not about finding another method. It's about stopping the search long enough to finally feel what's underneath all the doing. The fear, the rage, the grief. all the emotions you were never allowed to express. The body remembers them. The nervous system holds them. And now, they're surfacing, not to destroy you, but to free you. You start noticing how much of your suffering comes from resistance, the constant fight against what is, the war against your own feelings. You begin to see that the pain intensifies, not because it's growing, but because you keep trying to silence it. Every time you say, "I shouldn't feel this," you split. And in that split, depression thrives. But the moment you let the feeling in, even for a second, something softens. It doesn't fix you, but it connects you. And in that connection, there's life. You stop chasing happiness. You stop trying to feel better. Instead, you become curious. What's underneath the numbness? What lives beneath the anxiety? What's on the other side of the shame? You sit with it, not because you like it, but because running hasn't worked. Escaping hasn't healed you. So now, for the first time, you stay. You breathe into the discomfort. You let your heart race. You let the tears come, and you survive it. That's the beginning of power. Not in controlling your pain, but in learning you can hold it without disappearing. You also start seeing how much noise surrounds you. Constant input, notifications, opinions, news, posts, pressure to always have an answer, an identity, a brand. You realize you've never really been alone with yourself. Not fully, not in silence, and that terrifies you. But it also calls to you. You feel a pull to disconnect. Not from life, but from the illusion of it, from the endless distraction that's kept you numb. You begin creating space, not just physical, but emotional. You let yourself feel empty without rushing to fill it. And in that emptiness, something real begins to emerge. Something old, something true, something that was never broken, only buried. You start searching differently, not for answers outside, but for what feels right inside. You stop looking for a fix and begin looking for rhythm, the natural pulse of your own being. And this time, instead of reaching for something artificial, you go organic. You reconnect with your body. You walk, not to burn calories, but to return to the earth. You breathe, not to calm down, but to finally feel what's happening inside you. You eat slowly. You stretch. You rest without guilt. You begin to trust the intelligence of your body more than the noise in your head. The world told you to push harder, but your body tells you to soften. You were taught that discipline is the answer, but your nervous system responds to gentleness. You realize that energy doesn't come from forcing, it comes from flow. So you unplug. You take days offline. You delete the apps that feed comparison and shame. You stop watching content that drains you. And in that silence, your system starts to reset. At first it's strange, then it's peaceful. Eventually, it becomes necessary. You begin to notice that when you stop chasing stimulation, your sensitivity returns. You feel more. You cry easier. You laugh deeper. Music moves you again. Colors feel brighter. It's not always pleasant, but it's alive. You're not numbing anymore. You're participating. You're not outside of life, looking in. You're inside it, awake. And with that comes power. Not the kind the world sells, but the power to choose your response. The power to say no. The power to protect your peace. You study people who've walked through the same fire. Real people. Public figures who've spoken openly about depression. Like Jim Carrey, who said depression is your avatar getting tired of the role you're playing. Or Lady Gaga, who found healing through embodiment and trauma release. Or Anthony Bourdain, whose story reminds you how urgent it is to talk before it's too late. You don't idolize them, but their honesty gives you permission. Permission to speak, to feel, to stay. The healing isn't loud. It doesn't post selfies. It's quiet. It's in the moments when you choose to go for a walk instead of lying in bed all day, when you drink water before caffeine, when you stop and breathe before reacting. It's not dramatic, but it's sacred. These choices add up. They shift your chemistry. They build trust with your own system. And over time, they become your new baseline, one that isn't built on survival, but on connection. You realize healing is less about doing more and more about doing differently. You stop waiting for motivation and start creating structure, but one that honors your energy instead of punishing it. You build a simple rhythm. Wake up and write, not for clarity, but for release. You let your thoughts spill out uncensored, not to make sense of them, just to empty what's been stuck. You take your phone out of the bedroom. You spend the first hour with yourself, not with the world. You walk every day, even when you don't feel like it, because movement isn't just about fitness. It's about circulation. It moves energy. It breaks stagnation. It reminds you that you're not stuck. You start asking your body, where does it hurt? Not just physically, but emotionally. You scan it slowly, from jaw to chest to stomach. You learn to listen to tightness as communication, not malfunction. You stop overriding it with logic. You sit with it. You place a hand on it. You breathe into it. These are not techniques you found in some course. These are instincts you're remembering, ways of being that were always yours before the world taught you to override them. At night, instead of scrolling, you reflect. You ask yourself 3 things. What did I feel today? What did I need? And did I allow myself to have it? This isn't performance. It's intimacy. You don't judge the answers. You just witness them. Some days the answers are heavy. Some days they're quiet. But slowly, you begin to see patterns. You start to understand yourself not as a project to fix, but as a being to care for. That shift alone changes everything. You're not chasing a version of you that never existed. You're building a relationship with the one who's been here all along, the one buried under pressure, shame, noise. You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming for honesty. And when you touch that, even briefly, the fog lifts. Not forever, not instantly, but enough. Enough to know that you're on your way out. Not away from yourself, but toward. And that changes how you breathe, how you move, how you live. You understand now, the opposite of depression isn't happiness. It's connection to yourself, to your truth, to your direction. Because what many people call depression is often something else entirely. It's the absence of meaning, a life with no clear dream, no real purpose, no personal fire. And when you combine that emptiness with endless scrolling, comparison, influences, noise, of course you feel broken. But maybe you're not broken. Maybe you're just unaligned, disconnected from what's truly yours. That's why one of the most powerful ways to stay out of the dark is to define your why. Not a goal to impress others, a goal that ignites something real in you, a reason to wake up, a dream that pulls you forward even on hard days. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be true. Because when you walk towards something that matters to you, depression loses ground. Not because life becomes easy, but because now it has meaning. And if we're talking about real-world wisdom, here are 3 powerful tools from people who faced depression and found their way through. People not mentioned earlier, each with a voice completely their own. First, Tyler Perry. He went through extreme poverty, abuse, and deep emotional collapse. His core advice: create a space where your soul can breathe. That can be prayer, stillness, or a daily ritual. But it has to be sacred. What he's saying is this: every single day, give yourself quiet space. No phone, no noise, just your presence. Even 15 minutes can change your chemistry and restore your center. Second, Emma Watson. After global fame, she admitted to feeling lost, numb, and disconnected from herself. Her advice: learn to say no, even to good things, if they're not yours. So many people fall into depression, not from failure, but from success that never belonged to them. Protect your alignment. Just because you can, doesn't mean you should. Third, Keanu Reeves. A man who's endured profound personal losses, loneliness, and years of silent suffering. His approach is quiet, but firm. Stay engaged with something meaningful. Not work, meaning. Find one act every day that serves something beyond your ego. A gesture of care, a simple act of kindness, a moment of presence. That is soul medicine. So remember this: depression often isn't a malfunction. It's a message. And sometimes the message is that your life isn't rooted in what you really value. Shift that, and you shift everything. You don't need to become someone new. You need to return to who you were before the world told you who to be. If these words speak to something real inside you, subscribe to the channel. Let the algorithm carry this truth to others who are quietly drowning behind the surface of "I'm fine." And join the Telegram. That's where we go even deeper, beyond the noise, beyond the masks. If you saw yourself in any part of this, write in the comments, "I accept my shadow." Not as a trend, as a promise. A line drawn in the sand, a declaration that you're done running and ready to rise. This is only the beginning. But now, you're no longer alone.